Let's start with what happened on the court, because you need the full picture before any of the drama makes sense. Last night, in a building that was supposed to be hostile territory, Caitlin Clark walked into the Seattle Storm's arena and did something that doesn't happen in professional sports very often. She didn't just win. She didn't just perform. She rewrote history in front of a crowd that was supposed to be rooting against her. 34 points, 13 assists, 7 rebounds. On the road, in a building where, if you looked around, half the people wearing jerseys weren't wearing Storm gear. They were wearing hers. Think about what that means for a second. An away game, an opponent's arena, and the energy in that building bends toward one player who isn't even on the home roster. That's not normal. That's not something that happens in any sport at any level without something much bigger going on beneath the surface. But the number that matters most from that night isn't the 32 points, it's the 13 assists. Because those 13 assists didn't just make for a spectacular stat line. They pushed her past Courtney Vandersloot's single-season assist record for a guard in WNBA history, a record that had stood since 2020. And she didn't just tie it, she broke it in fewer games. She broke it while simultaneously leading the entire league in scoring. She broke it while every defense in the league was specifically designed around stopping her. And when the record flashed on the Jumbotron inside that arena, the crowd, the away crowd, people who drove or flew or made plans specifically to watch the home team, stood up and gave her a standing ovation. Let that land for a second. An opponent's arena stood up for her. Now, here's the thing. If the story had ended there, it would have been a great sports moment. A highlight, a tweet, maybe a spot on the evening news. Record broken, crowd goes wild, move on. But the story didn't end there, because about 3 hours later, something happened that turned a great sports moment into one of the most revealing conversations this league has ever had in public. Diana Taurasi posted a video. No filter, no PR team, no carefully crafted statement run through a publicist and approved by a brand manager. Just Taurasi, sitting in what looked like her living room, talking directly into the camera like she had something on her chest she needed to get off. And what she said stopped the internet cold. She looked at the camera and she said, and this matters, so pay attention to every word. She's doing things I've never seen. The passing, the range, the way she controls a game without even scoring. That's not rookie stuff anymore. That's all-time stuff. I said what I said back then, and I'd say it again. But she answered every single question. Everyone. That clip hit 16 million views before midnight. And if you're wondering why a simple video of one athlete praising another broke the internet that fast, then you don't remember 2024. Because in 2024, when Caitlin Clark was coming out of college as the most hyped WNBA draft prospect in a generation, Diana Taurasi went on national television and said something that became the single most polarizing quote of that entire draft cycle. She said it plainly, almost casually, like she was stating something obvious that everyone else was dancing around. Reality is coming. 2 words, that's all it took to split an entire fan base into camps.
On one side, you had the people who took it as the experienced veteran, keeping it real. The WNBA is a different game. The speed is different. The physicality is different. College records don't automatically translate. Fair point, reasonable context, nothing personal. On the other side, you had the people who heard it as something colder, dismissive, a legend from a different era trying to dim a light before it got too bright. And both sides dug in, hard, for months. So when Taurasi sits down in her living room with no script and no backup and says all-time stuff, voluntarily, without being asked, without being pressured, about the same player she once implied might struggle with the reality of the pros, that doesn't just land as a compliment, it lands like a thunderclap. It lands as the most credible form of validation this sport has ever produced. because it came from the last person anyone expected to give it, and it came completely on her own terms. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Sue Bird was on a live podcast recording when someone in the room played her the Taurasi clip, and her reaction was immediate. It was unfiltered, and it was, if you were really listening, kind of raw in a way that felt almost too honest for the moment. She didn't yell, she didn't storm off, she didn't say anything dramatic. What she said was this, and again, the exact words matter. No, see, this is what bothers me. Diana is being gracious, and she should be. Caitlyn has earned every bit of it. But I just want people to understand that what Diana built, what our generation built, is the reason Caitlyn has a stage to break records on. You can celebrate the new without treating the past like it was just a rough draft. That's all I'm saying. Now, let's be precise about what Sue Bird did and did not say in that moment. She did not say Taurasi was wrong. She did not say Clark doesn't deserve the praise. She did not question the record, diminish the performance, or suggest the standing ovation was unearned. She did none of those things. What she did was draw a very specific circle around something. And the thing she drew that circle around was legacy. Her generation's legacy. And she said, clearly, deliberately, don't forget us while you're building the monuments for what comes next. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Before she said, "That's all I'm saying," there was a pause, a full 2 seconds of silence. And if you watch the clip, really watch it, not just listen to it, her jaw was tight, her eyes were locked directly on the interviewer. And in that 2-second pause, you could see her making a calculation. How much of this do I actually say out loud? How much of this do I keep inside? And then she landed on the version that was controlled enough to be professional, but honest enough to be real. That pause told you this wasn't casual for her. This was personal. This was someone who spent 2 decades building something, watching that something get recontextualized in real time, and trying to figure out the right way to say, "I was here too," without it coming out wrong. And that brings us to the part of this conversation that nobody in mainstream sports media is actually connecting out loud.
3 weeks ago, before last night, before Taurasi'S video, before Bird's podcast moment, ESPN released its updated WNBA all-time impact rankings. And for the first time ever, they included something called an active trajectory metric. Essentially, a projection of where a current player's career arc is heading relative to historical benchmarks. A way of asking not just where someone is, but where they're going. Bird and Taurasi both appeared on that list. They're legends, of course they did, but look at where they appeared. They were listed in a subsection labeled Established Legacy. Past tense energy. The work is done, the case is closed, the verdict is in. Caitlyn Clark was listed in a different section entirely. Hers was labeled Ascending. Now think about the language there. Established versus ascending. One of those words points backward, one of those words points forward. And when an institution like ESPN, which controls broadcast rights, airtime, the way the sport gets packaged and sold to casual fans, when that institution starts using directional language like that in its official rankings, it's not just an editorial choice, it's a signal. It's the institutional energy of the sport telling you where it's pointed. And if you connect that to last night, Taurasi's praise reads slightly differently. It reads like someone who saw those rankings, understood exactly what they meant, and decided she'd rather be the one handing over the torch than standing there watching someone else take it. That's not cynical, don't read it that way. That's intelligent. That's a generational competitor who has always understood that the way you handle your exit is part of your legacy too. She chose grace. She chose to be the person who said it first and said it loudly, and that choice will follow her reputation in the best possible way. Bird chose something different. Bird chose to name the thing that everyone else was tiptoeing around. Some people, and you're already seeing this in the comment sections and on sports talk radio, are going to say Bird is overreacting. They're going to say that celebrating Clark doesn't erase anyone, that there's room for both, that honoring the new doesn't dishonor the old. And on a surface level, logically, that's a completely reasonable position. But here's why that argument doesn't actually hold up when you leave the logic and enter the reality. Attention is finite. Broadcast minutes are finite. Sponsorship dollars don't flow in every direction equally. They flow toward the future, toward whoever the league is being sold around, toward whoever moves product and fills arenas and drives streaming numbers. And this season, when Nike redesigned its Wnba campaign, you could count on one hand the number of times Bird or Taurasi appeared in that campaign compared to how many times Clark did. That's not a statement about respect. Nobody at Nike sat in a boardroom and said, "We don't respect Sue Bird." What they did was make a resource allocation decision based on where the commercial energy of the sport is currently pointing. And Bird, who spent 20 years as the face of this league's credibility, who helped build the Wnba into something that could produce a moment like last night, Bird can feel the concrete shifting under her feet, even when no one is saying it out loud, even when everyone is being perfectly gracious and professional and respectful on camera. She can feel it. And the fact that she said something, even in the careful, controlled way she said it, tells you that the feeling is strong enough that staying quiet felt worse than speaking up. This isn't jealousy, let's be clear about that, because the lazy take is going to be that Bird is jealous and Taurasi is gracious, and one of them is handling it well and the other isn't. That's too simple, and it's also wrong. What Bird is experiencing and what she expressed in that 2-second pause before she caught herself is grief. It's the specific kind of grief that comes from watching something you built become context instead of the headline, from watching your era shift from the story to the backstory, from realizing that the generation coming up behind you doesn't remember what it looked like before you made it look like this. That's not a small thing to sit with, and it doesn't make you a villain for feeling it.
So where does this go from here? Because last night wasn't an ending. If anything, it was an ignition point. And the next 48 to 72 hours are going to tell us a lot about which direction this conversation is actually headed. The first path is that this becomes a one-day story. Bird's comments get absorbed into the news cycle, Taurasi's video gets clipped and shared a few more million times, and by the weekend, everyone has moved on to the next game. That's possible. But given how fast the clips spread and how many people are already invested in this particular dynamic, that outcome feels unlikely. Call it a 20% chance. The second path is that Bird puts out a softer follow-up statement within the next 2 days, something that frames her original comments as both things can be true. Yes, Clark is extraordinary, and yes, the foundation matters. Bird is too media savvy, too experienced in how these moments get amplified and misread to let a raw podcast moment become the defining narrative around her legacy right now. A clarification is probably coming. That's the most likely outcome. Call it 50%. But the third path, the one that actually changes the conversation permanently, is that other retired players start saying what Bird said. Not in the same way, not with the same words, but the same core idea. That the generational transfer happening right now is real and significant and complicated, and that the people who built the foundation have earned the right to name that complexity out loud. Because if Bird's comment is a solo, it's a moment. If it becomes a chorus, if you start hearing similar things from other players of that era, it stops being about Sue Bird's feelings and starts being a genuine, league-wide reckoning about how a sport honors its past while accelerating into its future. That's a 30% chance. But if it happens, it becomes the defining subplot of everything that comes after it for the rest of this season and probably beyond. And if you want to know which domino to watch, the one that will tell you whether this stays a moment or becomes a movement, watch Breanna Stewart. Here's why Stewart matters more than anyone else in this conversation right now. She's not from Bird and Taurasi's generation, but she's not from Clark's generation either. She's the bridge. She played alongside the veterans who built this league into what it is. She's also competed directly against Clark in the current era. She has credibility on both sides of this divide in a way that almost no other active player does. And she has the platform, the respect, and the competitive standing to say something that people on both sides of this conversation will actually hear.
If Stewart speaks on this and comes out on Bird's side, if she validates the idea that the league's past deserves active, ongoing recognition rather than a respectful footnote, then Bird's comment graduates from personal grievance to shared truth. The conversation becomes structural. It forces the league, the broadcasters, the sponsors, and the fans to actually grapple with how they're handling this transition. If Stewart comes out on the other side, if she celebrates Clark's record without qualifying it, without drawing the line Bird drew, then the message is that the current generation has already moved on, and Bird's discomfort, however valid emotionally, doesn't represent where the sport is headed. Either way, Stewart's position changes the weight of everything that's already been said. So here's where we actually are right now, with everything laid out.
Caitlin Clark broke a record that had stood since 2020 in fewer games while leading the league in scoring, in an arena full of people who came to watch her even though she was the visiting team. Diana Taurasi, the all-time leading scorer in WNBA history, the same person who once told the world that reality was coming, sat down in her living room without a script and called it all-time greatness. And Sue Bird, watching all of that happen in real time on a live podcast, said something that was careful and controlled on the surface and completely raw underneath it. 3 people, 3 positions, and somewhere in the space between those 3 positions is the truth about what this league is becoming. Is it becoming a place big enough to hold the future and the past at the same time? Big enough to celebrate what's ascending without treating what's established as a closing chapter? Big enough to let a crowd give a standing ovation to an opponent's star and also remember the players who made that arena exist in the first place? Or is it a place where the resources, the attention, the broadcast minutes, and the sponsorship dollars are already so tilted toward one direction that the conversation about honoring the past is already happening too late? The record is in the books, the praise is on camera, the tension is in the air. And the question that nobody has answered yet, the one that's going to define how this league tells its own story for the next decade, is whether something has to break before anyone figures out how to hold all of it at once. That's the story. Not the stat line, not even the standing ovation, not even the viral clip. The story is a league mid-transformation, in public, with the cameras running and the microphones hot, and everyone, legends, rising stars, retired icons, trying to figure out their place in a picture that's still being taken. Watch what happens next, because whatever comes next isn't going to be subtle.